That's a real lost opportunity for you to exit at the highest value you could get. So preparation and remembering that this is a phase of that business. It's not something you just decide to do and then start preparing. At the time of you and I are doing our recording, we're only 18 months into this. So we're trying to look ahead and plan for this. And so we had to leave that acquisition opportunity because AI was too much of a threat to that type of business.
Welcome to the Build to Billions podcast, where we guide successful entrepreneurs and investors on their journey from millions to billions. We believe that the key to scaling your business and compounding your wealth starts every day with a mindset of stewardship over ownership and applying billionaire principles. Our ultimate goal, to help you scale and compound your wealth so you can give more or all of it away for maximum impact. I'm your host today, Brett Swartz. In each and every episode, we feature some of the world's top entrepreneurs, millionaires, and billionaires, where they share their principles, values, secrets, and wisdom, providing each of us with the insights we need to reach to the next level of success and impact. I'm excited about our next guest. He's out of the state of Nevada, and he's the owner and operator of multiple seven-figure companies and digital business acquisitions and operations expert. He's been a multi-million-dollar producer and managed over 200 consulting engagements in his career as a software architect and cybersecurity consultant with corporations including IBM, Microsoft, Amazon, Salesforce, and others. He received his bachelor's and MBA in economics and studying in China, Hong Kong, the Netherlands, as well as several postgraduate information security certificates. But his love and his focus right now is helping the entrepreneur, the founder, exit, and so in fact that's what we're talking about today, helping founders exit. Please welcome show with me Michael Frew. Michael, how are we doing?
Good. Thanks for having me. And that was a fantastic intro. I should copy that down.
Absolutely. And our listeners getting to know you for the first time, would you just give us a little bit more about your story and your current focus?
Sure. Yeah. So I grew up as an engineer developer and did that route for 20 years, like probably a lot of your listeners. It's a great path to start to build your net worth. It's usually a pretty high income business to work in. But like a lot of engineers, I started to wonder about, is this really the path that I want to be on? And so after about 18 to 19 years, I made that pivot to actually buying assets, which were businesses that were literally the same projects I'm working on in corporate America. I just went out and bought the projects and turned them into their own companies. So that was kind of where I made that pivot to start buying businesses, operating them, and going in that entrepreneurial direction.
That's awesome. And by the way, you can learn more about Michael by going to michaelfrew.com. That's Frew, but michaelfrew.com. So, okay, got it. And so let's just dive right into the topic, which is, helping founders exit. So what would you say is the number one secret to doing just that, Michael?
Yeah, that's a great question because there's probably a bunch of number one secrets, but really it's preparation at least 12 months beforehand. And so I'm very interested in software businesses and companies that are run by other engineers. And you can do almost everything you really want to do to position your business for sale very well if you take at least a 12 to 18 month horizon. And so learning a little bit from buyers like myself of what we're looking for, but more importantly, what turns us away. Because what you're really looking for is you're trying to find that marriage with someone that's going to be the best operator or the best partnership to take your company forward. And if we're turned away, that perfect operator isn't liking something about your business that you could have fixed a few months ago, that's a real lost opportunity for you to exit at the highest value you could get. So preparation and remembering that this is a phase of that business. It's not something you just decide to do and then start preparing.
Okay, and so let's dive a little bit deeper into that. So when you say preparation, how would you define maybe the top or two, three or four things that most founders are missing, and or maybe key personnel that they need to bring in before all of this happens? Walk us through some strategy, some insight on that.
Yeah, good point. So my acquisition criteria is almost always SaaS software. So what we're always looking for is someone that's selling a business that isn't really selling us a job. So if they do have someone that's running the operations or an engineering team that's going to replace the original founders, that is incredibly helpful because it's a much bigger burden for buyers to have to do that work themselves. So preparing to move yourself or your team out of the business is easily the best thing that you can do to make it more attractive for buyers.
Okay, got it. Right. So it makes sense, right? Are you really selling a true business versus are you selling a job? and having the systems, the personnel, everything in place so that the founder truly can exit. I mean, I think that's a whole other book and topic in of itself, but that makes sense. Okay, great. So the preparation is really important. What's the next kind of secret to making sure that you're going to exit really well and not have any regrets?
Yeah, so one of the things I can point out that I'm seeing a lot right now, and this is just for reference, we're talking maybe about the sub $5 million acquisition market. What you're seeing is a lot of venture capital has dried up, right? And so you're seeing a lot of venture funded companies that are suddenly having to sink or swim. And the problem is when they got free venture money, customer acquisition cost didn't matter. They went out and got as much as they could. They ran negative the whole time and they overhired. That's a pretty standard Silicon Valley practice. The problem is when you try and pivot and sell to investors like us and investors in your audience, that's about opposite of what we're looking for. We're looking for profitable customer acquisition costs. We're looking for really high margin per head count. So that change sometimes has to occur for a lot of these businesses. And that kind of goes right back to my first statement of we need to start that 12 months earlier, start showing profitability because the way companies are doing it now, they're just cutting out marketing and advertising and then saying, hey, we're profitable. Well, we're going to have to put all that marketing and advertising back in there. We can't just assume that it's going to be profitable from then on. What we really need to do is look at that head count and is this business even profitable with the way it has to acquire customers?
Talking with Michael Frew. You can find him by going to michaelfrew.com. Okay, that makes a whole lot of sense. I'm also thinking just about AI itself, right? And what's changing that maybe SaaS companies. But to talk to me, what's your insights on that, or thoughts on how AI is going to be changing how founders exit and how founders scale and do all the things we're talking about here?
Absolutely. There's kind of two aspects to that. One, it affects the market, right? So I was just post LOI with a business going through due diligence, and we realized that AI was going to probably disrupt this business in the next couple of years. And at the time of you and I are doing our recording, we're only 18 months into this, so we're trying to look ahead and plan for this. And so we had to leave that acquisition opportunity because AI was too much of a threat to that type of business. The other thing we're really seeing is entrepreneurs always looking over their shoulder at the next great thing. They might have a business that's running really well now on technology that was really fun a few years ago, but now they want to go and start that AI business. And that's where you're starting to see them position themselves to sell as well. So I'm seeing it kind of affect what does it look like from the buyer side of is AI going to eliminate or completely change this market? And then I'm seeing it on the seller side where people want to start selling their businesses because they want to focus on a purely AI opportunity next.
Fascinating. So, what would you say is the most important mindset to have as founders or as owners or business owners right now of companies in the next 3 to 5 years? How would you make sure that mindset is in the right spot here?
Yeah, and I think I can pull it back generally a little bit away from AI because you should think about it this way all the time. You have really two sets of customers. You have the customers that you're dealing with on a daily, monthly, annual basis, and those are the ones we talk about, and we're on YouTube figuring out how to sell to them. But there's also the eventual customer, which is going to be someone that you sell the business to. And you should always keep that second customer set in mind as well and build your business with the idea to sell. And there are books out there, and I try and kind of share my information and what I've learned as well of how to think of your business, even if you don't intend to sell today. The fact that at some point businesses do one of two things. They either go bankrupt or they get sold. So if you're hoping to go the positive direction, you want to go in that selling direction, always consider that second set of customers that would be buyers like myself and buyers like other listeners on your show.
Excellent. Let's bring this to life a little bit, right? Maybe some case studies or some recent deals, especially recent deals in today's marketplace, right? Because interest rates have been higher, obviously,
Yep.
and like you said, capital has a lot of places dried up. It feels like a lot of people are it's oxygen, and a lot of people are kind of starving for breath here to get the capital to either purchase deals. Debt seems to be readily available, but it's just a higher loan to value, ratios and such. So just talk about maybe some deals you've seen get done recently, and what were some of the insights there to get those across the table there.
Yeah, over the last 24 months, the change in just being able to have access to cash, and or at least having cash on the side. So a lot of cash access has dried up. if I think about an acquisition I did about 18 months ago, the way I structured that deal, it doesn't even exist anymore. Interest rates have changed that whole market. So, just like you said, we're looking at a lot more debt to be financing some of these acquisitions. So, if you have more cash and could structure that for a seller, it's going to put you kind of in the front running, especially if you're doing a competitive acquisition process against other buyers. So, always, as always, having access to cash, but you can still use debt financing. But you're right, this market has changed quite a bit because I've been doing this about 10 years. In that first 10 years, it was a little bit of the Wild West on the, small online market space. Capital wasn't really available until the last couple of years. Now, even the SBA allows online businesses to have loans. But even with that maturing of the process, it wasn't something we've had for a long time. So always being cash positive is just the most helpful thing to be able to win really tough acquisitions where other bidders are also kind of shooting for highest market value.
Excellent. I like that. Again, michaelfrew.com if you want to learn more about Michael here. And so, Michael, walk us through a little bit, the people that you work with, right? The people that are hiring you and bringing you in to help them with their exit and strategy and mindset and all of these things. Walk it through what that looks like and how you best serve your clients and the people who are founders that are exiting.
Right. Yeah. I try and emulate what a broker would do and say, all right, let's start top to bottom. What's going on in this business? What are the good things that we have? And we know there's going to be negatives. How can we fix those? The things we can't fix in 12 months, let's just not even worry about it. And let's put things together. And it's going to sound so simple. Like, let's make sure your finances look good, right? And let's make sure they're done. And you can just very easily hand it to a broker who's then going to hand it out to buyers, and being able to put that package together. Most sellers, this is the first time they've probably ever sold a business. And even the second or third time, the industry changes. What the industry expects is different. So even being able to get my perspective of, hey, I'm out here every day kind of looking at this. This is what us buyers are looking for. If you position it and kind of craft your business like this, you want that feeding frenzy where everybody's trying to just keep bidding higher and higher for your business.
Excellent. So it sounds like you mentioned you're like a broker, so it sounds like you're not a broker. How would you define your role, or the way that you come alongside founders?
Yeah, it's something I've kind of just come up with myself. I recognized you'll see also on my site, I write a lot of stuff for buyers because there wasn't a point of view of what life is like for buyers out there. If you think of a parallel of real estate, there's millions of books written by real estate agents and people that buy assets and everything. And there's really nothing like that for buyers of online businesses and sellers of online businesses. So I just kind of started writing about it. And what I realized was what I was really helping were the sellers to understand what us buyers are looking for and the mistakes that buyers make. And that's where people would start to reach out and say, hey, I saw you on this brokerage just talking about something. Can we chat a little bit about what I should do if I'm going to sell in 6 months? So I don't know if I even have an official term for it yet, but yeah, it's almost like I will help consult with you. I enjoy looking at businesses to try and make them sell better. It's just a way I can give back. I wish I knew more about this when I was younger. And so I'm always trying to help out Michael Frew from 10 years ago. And so if I can do that for a younger entrepreneur on their first opportunity to sell their business, that's exciting for me.
I think that's great. Yeah, it's the sage wisdom from someone who's been there, who's done that, and who's helped others do the same thing along the way.
Yeah.
And especially for online businesses, right? That's like the niche that you're in, right? SaaS companies, and being able to do that, that's a powerful thing to help people. I want to shift a little bit into like capital gains tax, right? So I think one of the biggest things that people sometimes miss or don't plan for, kind of what you're saying, plan 12 months in advance. They might build a company for 5, 10, 15 years. And if they spend a little bit of time building what we call a capital gains tax exit plan, all of a sudden they could have an extra 25, 30, 40, 50% more proceeds, right? And the government has been there the whole time waiting for this moment, right? Because they get a big chunk of it. But if you build a plan and you can defer that tax, it can change the course of someone's wealth. So I'm curious, in your experience, for those that are exiting these highly appreciated businesses, what's been the biggest frustration when it came to capital gains tax exit planning, and/or what are some strategies that you work with founders to solve for this?
Easily the biggest frustration is at this size, people aren't planning. Almost all of these sales are asset sales. And so a little bit in the asset purchase agreement kind of works out what is going to be taxed in which brackets. I have also done a stock sale, which is very different for the online business community, and that was completely for a tax reason. So thankfully, that seller really had thought this through. And so I wish there were more like them. On the buy side, we really don't like that, but from the sell side, I think, hey, this was perfect. This is how I'd like to structure my sales in the future. And you're absolutely right. The first thing when my wife and I say, okay, this business we've had it 9 years, is it time to move it to the next operator that can take it to the next level? That's the first question is, okay, we're going to lose this cash flow and we're going to have this huge tax hit. What can we do to make this better and maybe do it 18 to 24 months later? So just the biggest frustration is just getting people to think about it again, because this is a phase, it's not an event. And so you want to think about it as a phase.
Okay, excellent. So I'm going to dive into a little bit more into this. And I like the way you put that. Two things quickly. Why does a buyer, so our listeners to hear this, why does a buyer prefer an asset sale? And why does a seller prefer a stock sale? Talk about that here. And then number two, he says, I can lose their cash flow. And so if we can potentially delay that for 18 to 20 months, 24 months, right? Walk us through how you're structuring that, what you're looking at there.
Yep. So I'll try and do that in the right order. So as a buyer, the reason we like asset sales is one, we're not buying the liability of the company. And two, we can depreciate whatever is considered an asset in the business. And so for online businesses, it's very hard to judge what percentage that is, but you kind of negotiate that in the APA, and then I'm able to depreciate that in the future. And your listeners would be familiar with that with real estate. So from the seller side, the best way when they're doing a stock sale, that is a huge capital gains opportunity because there's ways to structure it so you don't have to pay any taxes if the business is a certain number of years old, and you can actually walk away tax free. That's pretty fantastic, but you need to have that planned almost at the start of a business. And so it's great that you're educating your listeners as early as possible in their career trajectory here to, or at least let's say the business trajectory, to think about that all the way through. And I'm going to edit this one. I can't remember what the third question was.
No, that you nailed it. I think the last one would be just losing the cash flow and taking the hit 18 months. I think that's really important, right? People look at like if I'm going to sell this asset, Michael, right, and my income is $1 million or $2 million a year, 3 million, 5 million a year, whatever it is, and I'm going to have to pay this capital gains tax. And how am I going to bridge the gap between the transition to the next business venture or the next real estate investment or whatever that might be? Um, you know, how are you structuring ways to delay that 18 plus months, like you were saying before?
Yeah, it's a tough question because that cash flow is its own tax shelter because you're running business expenses through the business, and to lose that, you completely change kind of how your family business is run. In my respect. And so that really kind of limits even thinking about selling because you lose all those tax opportunities that you're getting from the daily, monthly, and annual cash flow. So if you are going to sell it, I do think that you need to kind of spend that amount of time, probably reach out to someone like you and say, all right, this is, I've got 5 LLCs. This is how everything's structured. I'm looking at selling the asset inside of one of these. Here's everything else that's going on in my world. I really need expert advice of how do I change the structure of these businesses? Should this be a holding company? Should these all be separate LLCs? All of those kind of questions. I'm not an expert on it because I'm just trying to run the business. So that's where I'm kind of coming to you and saying, how do I structure this? And as you can probably say, cool, we can come up with an answer, but we got to take some time to change everything so it's all valid and legal.
Yeah, 100%. And also there's times when people are, they're 30, 60, 90 days out from selling. They don't have the time and they haven't had the chance to plan for that. We do have a solution which I want to kind of run by you to see what you think. I started out at Marcus and Milchat, by the way, selling, helping people buy and sell multifamily properties, 1031 exchanges. This is like
Yeah.
2006. Then 2008 hit and the market crashed, and we basically quickly learned that 1031 exchanges weren't always our friend.
Yeah.
Now, 1031 exchanges don't work for businesses anymore, as well. They don't work for cryptocurrency or primary homes, and so we found a strategy. It's called a deferred sales trust. And what's really unique about it, it works for business exits, crypto, stock sales, asset sales, primary homes, real estate. But what's really neat about it is you don't have to finance the buyer. You can finance the trust and ask the buyer to show up with all the cash. And long story short, the deal closes and the cash is sitting at Charles Schwab and it can be diversified. It can go back into other business ventures with you. It can go into real estate ventures. It can go into just stocks, bonds, mutual funds, cryptocurrency. You can diversify the wealth and get the cash flow working for you. And so, example, we just did a $8 million business sale for a client out of Colorado. and theirs was a C corp, okay, and they're going to get crushed with tax, and they're going to get it as an asset sale, okay, and so all of it was going to be kind of devastating. But the total proceeds, somewhere around 35 to 40%, were going to be crushed by the tax. And so instead of having to pay it all in one year, they were able to defer all of the tax, move all of the 8 million into the trust, and then exactly what you said, they put it into something that was cash flowing around about 8%, compounding, but there's no toilets, no trash, no liability, no employees, no issues, and that wealth can work for them and their family for generations. And so this whole idea of building a capital gains tax exit plan, but it's also flexible. Should they want to go back into another business, they can partner with the trust tax deferred to start a new startup company. We did a $13 million, I'm sorry, $5 million Bitcoin exit for our client. And her biggest thing was she worked for Google, so she wanted to retire from the tech company, and she wanted to use the capital to start a tech online educational company, kind of like a Khan Academy. So that's what she did. She sold the 5 million at 54,000 a coin, deferred all the tax, and then used the money to part of the money in the trust to fund do the startup capital. So instead of having to get private equity or angel investors or debt, the trust funded it. And so that's the strategy. Any thoughts? Have you ever heard of that before?
I actually have not, and it just sounds absolutely fantastic. And your first question was, what do you think? And I'm saying it sounds awesome because that's you had asked a little bit about cash flow. A lot of times when I'm selling the business, what I'm looking to do is buy another one with the same money, and but then you're saying I just took a 30 plus haircut, so now I'm buying a less cash flowing business. So if you can help solve that for your listeners and other entrepreneurs like myself, it just allows us to continue to redeploy capital intelligently. And, without getting anywhere into politics, but I have a feeling that all of us deploy capital a little bit better than when it goes to the government. It seems that we're the ones that grow the country and everything better. And so keeping more of that in our hands, that would just be fantastic. So definitely something I would reach out for as well.
Cool. Yeah. If anyone wants to learn about that, you go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. We also wrote a book on it called Building a Capital Gains Tax Exit Plan. You can find that on Amazon. We hit Kevin Harrington from Shark Tank in the book, was pretty cool, and it hit #1 bestseller. So that's there. You got to plan it before the close of escrow, and ideally you plan it. You definitely have to plan it before then, but before the contracts start going and everything starts flowing, you want to get there early. Is what we're saying. So hopefully that's one of the things you're catching on with Michael and I is plan earlier, even though you're not thinking necessarily of selling today. Now that's a great time to just look at these strategies, look at other ways to build for the exit in case you do exit, and you will at one point, and you want to make sure you're not getting crushed or caught off guard. Michael, that being said, what question haven't I asked you that I should ask you about what you do in helping founders exit? Anything else that it comes to mind right now that you're really encouraging those that you're working with to be considering today?
Well, I will almost take it right off from the last thing you said. I'm always telling my wife that I want my businesses to be in a way that I could sell them in 30 days. If I get hit by a truck, she has to probably run it for 30 days. So she has a manual that she can do it. If I get hit by something bigger than a truck and she needs to sell it and she doesn't have any operational knowledge, but part of that would have this plan already set up, because if she's calling you at that point when we want to sell like as fast as possible, that's too late. And so I think that's really important to kind of have this already prepared before I'm even looking to sell or even considering it. And so I like that you brought that up. Outside of that, I think a lot of people end up with really individual questions based on where they are in their life. They could be that Google engineer that's now looking to maybe acquire a business to go run. Possibly your client would have found an educational business that, it does 50% of what she wants to do already. Let me go acquire that. Those kind of questions I'm always happy to answer. You can always reach me at the website. Same on the sell side. If you hear this and, you're thinking of, I've got a friend, relative, colleague that's going to sell their SaaS business, software business, Amazon e-com, content site, all of those kind of things. It all goes through the same selling process. Go ahead and send questions. I'm not really selling anything. I'm not selling training courses or anything. I'm just trying to help and give back. And so, yeah, reach out anytime that you have an interesting question, and hopefully I can get you at least pointed in the right direction.
Awesome. Michael, Frew, everybody. Michael, you ready for the lightning round?
All right, let's do it.
All right. Knowing what you know now, if you could go back to your 20-year-old self and you could sit down with the person you most admire or respect in business or life, what's the one piece of advice that would now, if he told you then, would save you hundreds of hours and perhaps millions of dollars in your pocket?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a little bit of what I did with my career path. If I had known earlier on that acquisition, instead of building a business, acquisition is the faster way to get to the wealth and the income and the freedom that you want, start that as early as possible by still working in companies, working as consultants, but trying to be in different departments, right? Get in marketing, get in the business side, get in accounting, so that when you go out as your entrepreneurial self, you have a little bit of all of that and you can move forward in your specialty.
Excellent. And by the way, to that thought, are there particular businesses that you're liking to acquire today? Are you buying them? You buying businesses yourself? Like, what's kind of your feel for like, okay, if I had 5 or 10 million to work with, I would purchase an asset or a business like this in this sector.
Yep, I'm very focused on infrastructure. So if we think back a couple years ago, the rage was NFTs and crypto. Well, that ran on the infrastructure that I already own. Now we're on AI. Doesn't make a difference to me. That high level marketing piece on the end, it's still a cloud infrastructure. So for me, I'm looking for cloud infrastructure companies. As you probably know, cybersecurity is a cash cow all over the world. It's an endlessly challenging problem. Not a lot of those businesses come for sale, but those are the two that I always look for. If it's cloud infrastructure, cybersecurity, or anything else that's kind of in the developer tools and services that engineers and developers use, that's just my specialty that I would take my 5 to 10 million and go out and acquire.
Awesome. Right on. Next question. What are you most curious about right now?
Ooh, interesting. Definitely the effect that AI will have. I'm in my late 40s, and I absolutely love what I do. So I know I'm going to be doing this for as long as I can. But what is AI's effect going to be for those of us, even now at whatever we consider at the highest level that we believe AI will affect last? But that is probably in your lifetime and mine. So what is that going to be like? And is it? I remember hearing Bill Gates saying, if you take away if AI says, "Hey, we can't have you doing your charitable causes because we're going to do it better," he says, "I would really lose a lot of purpose and mission if I wasn't waking up and doing that every day." And so when when a person like of that stature can't quite figure it out, that's something I'd think about a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious about that too. Next question. Favorite leadership quote or theme that you strive to live by?
Hmm. That's a good one. The one that I think I always remember is, and it's from one of those little airport books. I believe it's "Who Moved My Cheese," which was something 20 or 30 years ago. But it said, "What would I do if I wasn't afraid?" And I think so much of fear, at least in my life, is what has held me back. And so I still have that quote lying around. And when I see it, I can almost immediately pick up on something I literally didn't do today or did out of fear. And so even in my late 40s, I'm still learning from that quote. And it's just been a good bedrock, even from a book that I considered at the time very simple and elementary, but it's lasted with me all this time.
By the way, I love that book. I read it in 2009 after the crash and everything
Yeah.
else, right? My mentor had me read it. And I was like, wow, I should reread it. It's really a
Yeah.
good one.
I should probably pull it back out because it's like I
Yeah.
just remember that one quote and it's been a
Yep.
long time. So
Yep.
I'll do that right after this. It's a good
On the
Friday afternoon book.
on the theme of quotes, I listened to this or read this somewhere and I wrote it down. I want to just say I want to say it out loud and see what your thoughts on it. Okay, and it's talk about leadership, right? It says high capacity leaders take complete responsibility for their growth and capacity and lives, even in areas where they should not. Even if it's not my fault, it's my responsibility. It doesn't matter if it's my fault or not. What matters is who I become is my responsibility. So when you think about that, Michael, what comes to mind and what are some of the things that you're doing to practice responsibility, right, and high growth, even in, when it feels like it's not your fault or things aren't going your way or, just walk us through that mindset for how you're growing.
Yeah, it's that nugget where you mentioned there that even if you know you couldn't have avoided it or something external, you still have to take responsibility for it and train yourself. How am I going to react to this? Am I going to be me naturally? I emotionally would overreact, blame, and so you have to train yourself. Okay, that's not how professionals mature and become leaders. So that's something you start as soon as you hear that quote. Hopefully you're 12, 13, or early 20s, and you work on that your whole career. But it really is looking at everything that happens to you and saying, this really doesn't matter whether it's my fault or not. It's something I have to deal with and move forward. And I think you don't see that a lot in many personal lives and in business as well. There's a lot of blame passed around, and really you want to be saying, okay, doesn't really matter whose fault this was or how it happened. Where are we going from this moment forward?
So well said. And I would also add to that too, that when we own it, right? Like, when we own it, like take extreme ownership, right? Like Jocko would say, if you heard Jocko Willick,
Yep.
I think his last name, he says when we own it, we have the power, right? But if we're putting it somewhere else, we're giving the power away
Yeah.
because now if I'm pointing at someone else or something else, then it's outside my control. They only have the control to change that. But if I say, no, I own it, it's on me. Now I have the power to change it. And so just practicing that mindset, I think, is just so important every single day for all of us, whether we're high earners or we're high performers or business owners or founders. Is like you just got to continually know that, like, look, how do you take extreme ownership? How do you move forward? So, any last thoughts on that before we move to the next question?
Yeah, no, and that it counts for relationships. It's also outside the business world, and I can think of that a lot in relationships of where people will cede control to someone by just giving them the power over the situation. And so, yeah, just always keep that in mind, kind of in everything that you encounter.
Cool. Last question is this, and it kind of is like the theme of the podcast, right? We believe at Build the Buildings podcast that practicing a mindset and an actual stewardship over ownership, right? So being good stewards of the gifts, the talents, the wealth, the businesses, the relationships, our families, right? And that we're stewards of this, and we don't own it all. We steward it for a period of time while we're on this earth. What does that mean to you? Stewardship over ownership, and how are some ways that you're practicing that and making an impact for something that you believe in or a cause that makes a difference in people's lives?
Really timely question, and I'll answer it almost in a tactical manner. I'm having conversations with my family of what is the goal of this. If I continue to be successful, I am in a very small family. And so, I think all of us feel that the goal isn't really just to keep passing it down. How do we share this and spread this and make it grow? And so that is kind of, today, literally yesterday, today, and that's our plan this weekend is what is our long-term plan? We don't know how long we'll live, how many businesses Michael may have, or what that wealth looks like, and where should that go for the most impact? And it even goes back a little bit to our taxes conversation of I've lost my mother already, and so I saw the impact of taxes in that situation. And it never felt like this was really the best use of the money because we were also able to help with moving that forward and redistributing it in a way that creates jobs, creates businesses, solves problems. How do we continue to do that? So it's interesting that you asked the question. I don't think I have any great answer for it, other than the fact that it's something I'm literally tactically doing right now with my family.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And by the way, I want to just add a little side note on this. It's the largest wealth transfer in the history of the planet's happening. $84 trillion. Baby boomers, there's about 10,000 turning 65 every day. About 77 million in the U.S. alone. And most of these assets are tied to high-end primary homes, businesses, and commercial real estate, all of which are illiquid assets that are highly appreciated. And the other part about this that I think sometimes people miss, it has to do with the death tax and the estate tax, right? They think that the stepped up basis is going to solve that, and that only solves for capital gains tax. But the bigger issue is this 40% death tax, and in fact, as of 2026, it's cutting down to about, we think it's going to be about 12 to 14 million married, or about 6 to 7 million single. So anything above and beyond that is going to be subject to a 40% death tax unless you give it to charity, which is a great option. Buy a bunch of life insurance, which can be an expensive option. Have a bunch of kids, but you kind of can run out of kids, run out of time. And so we actually have a solution for that. It's actually in the book that we wrote. It's called a deferred sales trust plus, and it eliminates the estate tax in one sale in one day. No charity, no life insurance, no gifting required. You can still give it to charity if you want to, but not required to give it all the way to charity. And it's remarkable, right? And this strategy, by the way, goes back 30 years, close to 30 years now, thousands of closes, been through all the audits, perfect legal track record. We think it's the best kept secret. This is why we've kind of dedicated our career to doing this, what we do. Yeah, that if people want to learn more about that, go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. So important to start to plan for the legacy wealth planning, and have that in place, because otherwise, you know, it's the opposite of being a great steward. Because you're right, if the government gets their hands on it, they're probably not going to be very efficient with it, right? The 35 trillion, it's going to be eaten up in interest. But if we keep it in the hands of the people in a way that they can make a big difference, right? And not have to force the charity, but to give where they believe is a great return on that investment, right? It can change the world. and we have about this 18 years time frame to do it. Is the big wealth transfer. So any last thoughts on that or feedback?
Boy, I'd love to look into the future and see how we do after those 18 years, right? And we see the performance of the economy in general of, okay, so after this wealth transfer has occurred, yeah, did that help grow the economy? Did it get eaten up somehow where we made mistakes by doing it? So I'm so glad that we're having this conversation because I feel quite young to be thinking about, succession plans. But because I'm talking to older people in my family, they asked me the same question. That's a great question, Michael. So what's your plan? And I had never thought of it. So yeah, it's never too early. I'm definitely gonna check out the book to make sure that I'm all caught up on everything I need to know. Like you said, everything changes, and when I'm out there operating the businesses, that stuff I'm not paying attention to on a daily basis. So it's really helpful to have professionals doing that full time for ourselves.
Absolutely. And Michael, thank you so much for being on the show. I want to thank you for sharing your wisdom, your inspiration, your thoughts on leadership. And I want to thank you for having a heart for founders, right? And serving them, helping founders exit, think well, think wisely, think like stewards, right? And to prepare and plan. It's so important. For our listeners who want to get in touch with you, would you mind one last time what's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, easiest, just my own website. It's michaelfrew.com. And just reach out, contact me there. I've got a couple newsletters, both for the buy side and the sell side. And I post every article up there of here's mistakes I've made. Here's kind of what one should do in this situation or what definitions of different things are. So, yeah, website's the best place to start and reach out to me from there.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Michael, for being on the show. And I also want to thank all of our listeners for listening to the episode of the Built to Billions podcast. We believe in an ever evolving landscape of entrepreneurship. The journey from a million to a billion is not just a leap of faith, but it takes transformation that demands relentless innovation, strategic foresight, and an unwavering commitment to growth. And I hope you've had some inspiration today to grow today, some tactical knowledge to grow as well. And we hope you take the idea of practicing stewardship over ownership another step forward today and find out how do you make a big impact for everything you're doing for your family, for your business, for your team, for your clients. And I encourage you to take action today, what you heard. Share this episode with someone it could be a blessing to. And we will talk to you again real soon. Thanks so much. Bye.